Hello. Are we ready to move on?
Hi, Geir. I think we're still waiting for Torfinor. You should be back in a second.
No problem. I was just worried that something technical had occurred because it was so silent.
Yeah, well, I had just right now a small technical problem. All of a sudden, all my screens got black.
Okay.
Never happened before. It happens today. But we're back. Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Good.
Sounds
Then
good.
Torfinor takes over.
Do you want me to start sharing, perhaps, or?
Well, it's nice if you would just start on camera and start sharing after just 10 seconds or something. But okay, I will introduce you. Okay. So, welcome back to our conference organized by the EFTA Statistical Office in Luxembourg. We are pretty much all over Europe today. The conference was supposed to be taking place in the EFTA house, where I am actually at the moment. My name is Torfinor Ómarsson. I'm the head of communications for EFTA Secretariat, and I'm moderating here today. Volker Teupe, my colleague in ESO, he already went quite deeply through the program before our coffee break, and we have the next presentation ready to start. It's Mr. Geir Axelsen. He's the Director General of Statistics Norway, and he will speak about Statistics Norway's role in data stewardship, legal basis, current situation, and ambitions for the future. And for the audience, please write questions in the chat whenever you want to, and we will try to ask the presenters. But Mr. Geir Axelsen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you both see and hear me? See the slides and hear my voice?
Yes, we do.
Thanks. Let me just quickly mention what I plan to cover. A few words first on data stewardship, and then some about the legal basis for Statistics Norway, and of course the challenges right now and ambitions for the future. Now, data stewardship is I still think that the definition of data stewardship is not necessarily finally, what should I say, matured. But I think we can agree on that it is about, managing a data ecosystem or a section thereof in cooperation with data providers, users, and other stakeholders, including data stewards of related data ecosystems. And of course, the purpose of this is to assure quality, sharing, and improving data and statistics interoperability and production processes, know-how on technology, literacy, and communication. Data ecosystem is also a key word here, and in my view, that is about a system in which a number of actors interact with each other to exchange, produce, and utilize data, statistics, and analysis. Let me just give you a very, very quick background for Statistics Norway and our history in only one slide. That's hard for me because it's of course many milestones that I could mention here, but of course we were early, like some other countries in Europe. We were early with the population census, the first one in 1769. And as an institution, Statistics Norway was founded as a separate institution in 1876. I guess the first 50 or almost 100 years, I think, in the history of Statistics Norway, surveys and censuses was of course the key source for data. But the last, let's say 70 years after World War II, registers as a source of data has been increasingly the key. And I think it's striking that Statistics Norway in 1964 established the national ID number and the first population register. And this was based on Statistics Norway's census, population census from 1960. So it's a clear link between our work with our population census in 1960 and the establishment of the first population register and establishment of the national ID number in 1964. And the population register was actually located in Statistics Norway and stayed there for 25 years before it was transferred over to the tax authorities. And still is, of course, our key source for population data. As most of you in the mid-90s, we discovered or started utilizing the new technology with internet and gradually the paper distribution of information was replaced, and we are all of us now dependent on websites, of course. The legal basis for Statistics Norway, well, the first Statistical Act was established already in 1907. And next time, the big revision of the Statistical Act happened in 1989. And then, just 2 years ago, June 2019, we got a new Statistical Act for Statistics Norway. And this was, I would say, it's a fantastic, important event for us. Of course, you could just imagine the development from 1989 and until 2019. One thing is the technological development, and the topic of today is data stewardship, and everything related to technology and data is, of course, one of the major elements that has changed our society from 1989 and until today. Another very important development, at least for Norway and many of you gathered today, is the EEA agreement that Norway and the EEA EFTA countries linked ourselves to the European Union through the EEA agreement, and this partnership is of course very important for Norway as a society, but in the statistical collaboration and cooperation it is very, very important for us, and therefore this is a great opportunity also to what should I say, highlight that. And of course, statistics, if you look at the different statistics that we publish in Statistics Norway, I think we publish around 300 different statistics every year. And I think about 60% of those statistics are influenced highly by international regulations and standards. And most of these regulations and standards come from the collaboration and cooperation in the European Statistical System. Now, the new Statistics Act, I would say it's a very, from my 100% objective perspective, it is a very modern act. But it has some, well-known goals, and one of them is, of course, to promote the development, production, and dissemination of official statistics. And it states very clearly that Statistics Norway is the central authority, and that we shall coordinate all development, production, and dissemination. In the statistical system in Norway, we are 12 producers of official statistics, but Statistics Norway, we produce about 85% of all the statistics in this program, and we are of course then the overall responsible authority for quality and coordination in this system. Now on data stewardship, the Statistics Act have several sections, clauses that describe data sharing in different ways. One of them is of course the the data sharing that follows from establishing a program for official statistics. So if one of the other producers in the program needs data from, for example, Statistics Norway, we will transfer data in a practical way to our colleagues for production of official statistics. And of course, it goes the other way back as well. So this is a mutual data sharing system for the producers of official statistics. The second and perhaps the most important section in the Act related to data stewardship is about sharing data for research purpose and analysis purposes. Of course, the typical customer for this service has been researchers and academia, but in the new law also other government authorities can be a customer for our data sharing here. But of course, there are very clear, conditions that has to be met before we can share data. We also have a clause in the law that opens up for sharing anonymous data. And of course, we have a statistical bank, and we also have established a microdata sharing platform where the users can only view the metadata. In the strategy for Statistics Norway, we have highlighted 3 main goals, and I would say that the first goal or ambition, that Statistics Norway shall be the leading supplier of facts about Norwegian society. I think that has been, what should I say, part of our soul since 1876 and should always be a major ambition for a national statistical organization. The 2 other goals is more colored by the development the last decades. For example, that we have a clearer role in cooperation, coherence and quality in the Norwegian statistical system. That is a direct consequence of the new Act. And even more, the last goal here in our strategy, that we shall collect, use and share data for the benefit of society. That kind of goals would you won't find that that kind of phrases if you go back to strategies in the 70s or 80s or even 90s. Let's go back to the data sources and the statistical system in Norway. As I mentioned when I showed you the very quick overview over our history. I mentioned that more and more administrative sources or registers are the main source of data for Statistics Norway, and these 3 examples is probably the backbone here. You have the national registry to the right, of course. Very, very important part of Statistics Norway's data source. Then we have the new cadastre for all properties, including buildings and addresses. And of course, for the business sector, we have the central coordinating register for legal entities. I could also mention the 4th very, very important register, and that is the register for employers and employees. This is a register that Statistics Norway established together with the tax authority and together with the Labour Market and Welfare Directorate back in 2015. So this is quite new and a 4th very, very important administrative register. So these 100 different registers gives, of course, fantastic opportunities for producing statistics and also sharing data, of course. But we haven't stopped, with service, and we will always need to do surveys on several areas. For example, we just recently had a big survey asking 40,000 respondents related to life quality, to people's subjective view of life quality, and then it's hard to do that kind of data collection in any other way than through a survey. Or I could mention the labor force survey, of course. And we also have a big number of business surveys. Now, new data sources, and I was very inspired by several of the other presentations earlier today. I think there are many similarities here. One key point I can mention is that in the new Statistical Act, we have I would say, a license to operate, if you could use that big expression, which is Section 10 in the new law, which says that Statistics Norway, we can require information from any source, private or public, in order to develop, produce, and disseminate statistics. So as long as the purpose is to produce official statistics, and we can argue well that this source of data is necessary to reach that or to produce that statistics, or to develop a new sort of statistics, we have the legal mandate to actually require information from both private and public sources. And these examples are new sources that we have started to utilize. We used our new law in June this year, and went to the bank sector in Norway. They have joined forces when it comes to payment system. And they have a joint debit card payment system, and it's called VIPS. And we went to this company and used this new Statistical Act, and from June and forward, we have gotten on a daily basis debit card transactions aggregated and distributed on, or aggregated based on a NAS criteria. But it gives a fantastic opportunity to, for example, follow the business cycle developments, and particularly now during COVID, it's a very, very valuable source to increase quality, timeliness, understanding, for example, within national accounts and within business statistics. This autumn, we have used the same paragraph in the law to get data from all the big grocery chain stores in Norway. And they have about, I think, more than 90% of the grocery market in Norway. So all the, the daily receipts are now streamed into Statistics Norway on a daily basis. Now, this is it's important to say that the first example with debit card, then we get the data on an aggregated level, so it's not micro data, and you can't, display any, personal information for anyone, and the receipt data does not contain any information on the customer. It's just the consumption on different groceries that are revealed. This is for experimental statistics, but it will also hopefully be a big source for the consumption statistics. We have also started with metering values for consumption and production of electricity, and we have also, of course, utilized via Eurostat the collaborative economy platforms. Now, this is an example, or at least an attempt to illustrate how the data ecosystem for official statistics works in Norway. To the left here, you see all the data sources, both surveys, the public registers, the more than 100 registers, and then all the private sources that I mentioned. And for Statistics Norway, of course, some of these sources feed straight into the production of statistics. Some of it go into our registers, and we have some of the register we manage ourselves. Others are managed by our partners, and then the data from these registers go into the different purposes. Many of them go into statistics production again, while others go to other governmental agencies or directorates that have other purpose for data sharing. For example, the health sector are establishing a health data sharing platform. The university and education sector are working on similar. Now, I mentioned in the beginning how we could define data stewardship, and I think this was mentioned earlier, that in many ways it's about managing a data ecosystem in cooperation with data providers, users, and other stakeholders. So I would focus on how, so let me highlight some of the hows, and this is more or less thing that we work with in Statistics Norway. First of all, that we collaborate actively with many government bodies. In the new Statistical Act, it was also established a committee for official statistics, and this committee contains 25 different governmental bodies. It's led by me and Statistics Norway. As I mentioned, 12 of the members are statistical producers in the program for official statistics, while the other 12 or 13 are typically owners of different registers, the key register owners. So this is a good group for discussing both the program of official statistics, but also to discuss dissemination of data and statistics. Of course, I mentioned several examples earlier for consumption, receipts, transaction data, electricity. All these examples, they definitely requires that we develop our own methodology and not to forget technology. So we are working hard both on trying to build a statistical or trying to build a data platform where we use cloud storage and cloud services. And this is, of course, it's demanding but necessary. We have to try to get experience to learn, but do it gradually, of course. So we are in the middle of a huge transformation in Statistics Norway related to this new, both new opportunities related to new data sources, but also then how do we develop our own methodology, how do we utilize new technology, and how can we do this in a safe way and at the same time without disturbing too much the current business operations, because you need to publish and produce statistics every day, and at the same time we try to do this innovation or utilizing these new sources. Ambitions for the future. First of all, I think we need to cooperate both within the national statistical system and also outside. And for example, I think it was you, Volker, or someone else who mentioned the word partnership earlier today. And I have talked a lot about the new act and that we have a legal opportunity to require information, but you need partnership as well. So I think it's good to have the stick, but it helps even more if you can use the carrot as well. These examples that I mentioned earlier, that we had used a new statistical act to require information from banks and from grocery chains, we haven't been able to succeed if we haven't also had a good connection and discussion with these entities first and gotten their understanding for why we need this, and we need to reduce their reporting burden as much as possible, and even better when they realize that these data sources for us can actually reduce other reporting burdens that they have had in the past. So partnership is a key word here. We work also on sharing statistics and data on this new platform, and I mentioned this earlier that we have started to develop a platform that utilizes cloud service and cloud storage. It's I mean, it raises, of course, many questions, and we are very keen on everything related to information security, GDPR-related issues. So we have to move slow, but we have to move because if you just keep on the old, just limit ourselves to the old data sources and refuse to utilize new technology and new opportunities, I think gradually we will become less and less relevant for our users. And that brings me to the last point. A big part of being a data steward and a national office for statistics is also to continuously follow the user needs. And of course, it's about statistical literacy, but it's also about developing visualization opportunities, present the statistics and the data in a user-friendly way, and of course also explain what data we have, what the data, how we can interpret the data, etc. I think I'll leave it with that for now, and I guess there are some questions as well later. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Geir. This was very comprehensive. Maybe you can stick around for half an hour. There might be questions to both of you, because next we have up Mariana Kotzeva. She's the Director General of Eurostat, and her presentation is about the European Statistical System in the data-driven European society, challenges and chances. So please go ahead, Mariana, and let's take the questions together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. Let me first congratulate you for the nice birthday. 30th anniversary is a very nice birthday when you are still young, but enough experience and looking for even more active future. So I would like also to especially thank you to EFTA Statistical Office and all the EFTA countries for being proactive and excellent member of the European Statistical System. So yes, we will go with the slides, and thank you to the organizers for moving the slides. I think it will be faster to be sure that technologies will work for us. So we could go to the next slide. The idea of my talk today could be that I contribute to the discussion on the very important topic of data stewardship and what kind of functions the NSIs could play in society driven by data. So my contribution will be in two dimensions. First, to summarize the main developments and elements at European level concerning the data and emerging data ecosystem, and then in the second part to summarize for the European Statistical System the latest state of play of discussions on the data stewardship. I think this could be a useful contribution to the further talks. So now starting with the environment, as the whole trigger of systematic approach to building a society driven by data was given by European Data Strategy, which was put forward by the European Commission in 2022. So actually we have been actively talking about data economy, society driven by data, data ecosystems, data stewardship since 2020. So it's just 1 year and a half. Almost 2 years, but the discussions have been very, very intensive. So the basic ideas, and it's good sometimes to summarize the basic ideas because this helps us to structure our own discussions. What is our place in this data-driven society, our place as official statistics? So the key elements, the idea behind the European data strategy, where the European society is moving to, is to set clear and fair rules on access and reuse of data. And we are pretty much interested in this because, of course, the access to primary data sources and reuse of data play survival, as sometimes I say, play a crucial role in order to fulfill our mission. And then to invest in next generation standards, tools, and digital infrastructures to store and process the data. And closely related to that, a highlight of the intentions of the EU are to join forces in European cloud capacity and common European data spaces. And then the final one is to, of course, not only to give rights, tools, and skills in general, but to put fully in place the data owners to control their own data. So this is the general spirit of the data strategy. If we could move to the next slide. There you see, of course, this structured approach has to be based on legal framework. And there are 4 key legal instruments that are in process of preparing or in process of negotiation between the Council, the Parliament, and the Commission. Some of you in the previous presentations referred to this instruments. Very quickly, the first one which was put forward was the Data Governance Act. And what is important there, where we as statisticians have to look at it, is that this is the first time when in a legal act there was a very active promotion of the reuse of public sector data. And this, of course, concerns official statistics because we are a main producer of public sector data and statistics. And we have to contribute to creating conditions and practicable mechanism to reuse our products by the private sector or other public organizations. One very important point of data governance was the new business model which was created and which is related to data intermediation. So in fact, our usual word, which consists of data users and data producers, was enriched with a new player, the player of data intermediary. And this is a new player, so we have to see how to work with such kind of players. We are not anymore working only with data users and producers. And then the last element of Data Governance Act, which is of crucial importance for us, is the idea to encourage data altruism, the simple idea that the data in the society has to be voluntary, provided for public good. And since we are indispensable part as official statistics of public good, this is a new source of inspiration for us. This is in interest of official statistics to further develop this data altruism mechanism, which could provide new primary data sources for us. Then the second element, legal act, is digital service package, which main idea is to provide a safe online environment. In that respect, its focus is primarily on online platforms, creating a transparency, accountability framework for them, but also trying to regulate the relations between the owners of the data, which were collected by online platforms on the one side, and how the data of online platforms will be used on the other side. And again, we have big interest as official statistics to see the outcomes of this digital service package, which includes, by the way, Digital Service Act and Digital Market Act. two legal acts, in order to see how we are going to work in the future with online platforms, because they could provide an important primary source data for us. There is a specific implementing act under Open Data Directive, not to bother with details. The idea is to promote the use of open data in society in order to encourage innovation, in particular concerning small and medium-sized enterprises. And there we are on, if I could use this, on a giving side, that our products should be, let's say, transferred in open data in order to allow the value of our products to be further invested in innovation and economic growth. And finally, what is currently under the preparation still in the European Commission, and you could imagine this is a fundamental legal act, that's why they are hot discussions, and the act is still under the preparation in the European Commission. It is expected to be approved at the end of February 2022, and it will be very important because it will establish basic rules and procedures for data sharing on one side between business and business, and on the other side, which is of primary interest for official statistics, rules for business to government data sharing. So we could move to the next slide, because actually this is the first part of my presentation, which describes what is going on at European Union level in general. We're building up society driven by data. The question is now, what does it mean for us, for official statistics? And as it was pointed out in an excellent way in the first opening presentation by Statistics Iceland, we are facing fundamental question: shall we move from our traditional mission to produce high quality data and statistics on Europe to be a trustworthy reference point for such data? Are we moving to a new world where we have to expand our roles and functions in these emerging European and national data ecosystems, which I have just described? And shall we assume sorry, I didn't switch off my mobile. Sorry for that. So then the question is, shall we assume data stewardship functions? Could we cover by this concept all these new roles and functions? So then we could move to the next slide, where I'm moving to our ESS experience. Before going with some concrete lessons learned so far, questions raised, just to remind once again that the data stewardship function was put forward at European level by the high-level group on business to government data sharing, which was speaking about data stewardship function at micro level, which means that each organization, public and private, should have a position of a data steward inside the organization, that this function, this position should become a recognized function and position. And then actually what we are talking about, what is specific in our conversation is that we are focusing at macro level, at the level of the public sector as a whole, who will play this role of a data steward in the government, in the public sector, and is the statistical office the one who could be a candidate to play that role, and is the statistical office is intending to play such a full role or only elements of that, and how this function and these elements are fitting to our or standing next to our core mission to produce high quality data and official statistics on countries and at European level. So then let's move now to okay, what I wanted to share with you, what we have done in the last year in the ESS. Could we move to the next slide, please? So we are going to the concrete results of our work in the last year. So we, as usual, when we are approaching a new phenomena or new issue to tackle, we do a survey in the ESS in order to understand what are different national experiences and to try to find a common denominator and to identify actions which make sense to be done for the system as a whole. We conducted a survey in the summer of 2021, and we were very pleased that 30 NSIs, which means 26 EU member states and 4 EFTA countries, responded to the survey because we wanted to avoid to go into discussions of definitions. You know that we statisticians like to discuss definitions for a long time. We try to avoid the discussion of the definition about data stewardship, and we formulated the questions in more open manner, trying to understand what are the actions, what are the activities in which NSIs are involved, activities related to broadly defined data and information management in the public sector and in the government. And also we wanted to identify these parts of the actions which are enabled by legislation and the others which are done on a voluntary principles. So if we go to the next slide, actually I have 3 slides which summarize these results. So the first one summarizes what kind of activities are taking place nationally, and they could be considered as elements of the data stewardship. We also had these examples in the previous presentations. I think it's good also to have them summarized on one slide. Of course, NSIs traditionally have been involved with facilitating the public bodies in building data and digital infrastructure, for example, building administrative registers or other information systems. The second avenue was to continue contributing to the standardization and interoperability of data across the government, but in the modern digital context, because interoperability has become a crucial factor, enabler for reusability of the data across the government. And our long-standing experience in the field of providing data standardization, harmonization, interoperability in order to make the data linkable is highly appreciated by the governments. Then, in the same line, our experience with statistical confidentiality and data protection, in particular with anonymizing the data using different concrete techniques, has been also highly appreciated, and different NSIs in different countries contribute to the national strategies in that respect. Then, especially during the pandemic, many NSIs started to do more data linking to produce additional insights in order to increase, let's say, response and to faster response, but to make it deeper, to enrich it, the response to emerging questions related to greater public good. And then, of course, the experts from NSIs participate in different public networks, training and developing data capacities. So it's quite a comprehensive agenda, as you see. So there are many possibilities to exercise a data stewardship function. So then if we move to the next slide, the second, let's say, element which we wanted to check, in addition to collecting, to mapping what kind of activities which could be related to data stewardship were exercised by NSIs or have been exercised by NSIs, we wanted to see to what extent there is a well-defined national approach to building data ecosystem, national data ecosystem, whether there have been national data strategies and whether the function of the data stewardship has been covered by these national data strategies, or rather the whole activities were organic, emerging based on voluntary, ad hoc requests, bilateral relations between NSIs and different public bodies. So you see on the slide, I would say roughly it's less than 50%, but the situation is so-so. Half of the countries have no framework for national data strategy or national data sharing legislation, and the other half they have. But really those who are with very clearly defined functions of national data stewardship role, and that this is clearly stipulated in the legislation, a very limited amount. So as Volker said when he was asked a question, we are still discovering what is the best way forward, not only in the official statistics, but also in general, let's say, governments and societies, European societies, European governments. They are still trying to find the right systematic approach and the right legislation in order to create the data ecosystems. So then we could move to, so our debate and this event is coming at a very important stage, because we could only benefit from having this event and exchanging experience. So then if we move to the next slide, this is the last slide presenting the results from the survey. This part was focused more to see to what extent NSIs were given this data stewardship role, were assigned this data stewardship role. And then what we found is that for almost all, I think with one exception that somebody didn't answer to this, which practically is all NSIs, in all these cases, the data stewardship role is not entrusted to the NSI, or not entirely to the NSI. If I would like to put in other words, we could say that we don't have a case where it's clearly said NSI is the data steward of the public sector. Rather, there were questions about separate activities which could be performed by NSIs, separate activities which could be elements of the data stewardship function. But on the other side, as concerning separate concrete activities, as the ones which I enumerated a few slides ago, all NSIs are involved in one way or another, contributing with concrete activities. Then we ask whether it's important for statistical offices that the data stewardship role, and especially the elements of that role which could be performed by NSIs, whether they need to be established in a legislative framework. And 19 NSIs of the 30 responding to the questionnaire said that it is good that this function and elements of the function are established in the legislative framework. The last question which we asked was raised during the survey, but it was raised also today several times: how to ensure the professional independence of statistical offices if we assume more and more data stewardship activities, especially those data stewardship activities which are related to other data, not when we go beyond the data stewardship activities related to production and dissemination of official statistics. And this is one of the, I would say, the hottest questions which are still discussed among the director generals in the ESS, how we could ensure, how we should delineate our core business from the additional data stewardship activities. So then if we move to the next slide, I just wanted to refer that in addition to the survey, which provided quite a rich source of information, what is going on across ES in terms of data stewardship, we had a special event, even in the opening remarks, there was a reference to it. There was a high-level event, Data from and for Society, organized jointly by the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the EU, with the support of the other two countries in the trio from the presidencies trio, Germany and Slovenia, and also Eurostat, where we have external speakers and also director generals, that where we were discussing the important elements, how we could get data from society in order to produce insights, high quality statistics for public good, and actually to produce this for the society. And then we covered as element of that event, we cover also partly the data stewardship roles and functions. And then I just wanted to highlight three elements which emerged during the discussion as minimum conditions, prerequisites for NSIs to successfully perform such kind of function. First is a clear vision of national and the EU data strategy, what this function involves, what are the elements, which organization should play these elements, and what exactly the NSIs will do in exercising this data stewardship role at national and European level. Again, the stress for need for legislation, explicitly referring to the NSI role, was highlighted. And then we had a long discussion, as usual, about the resources. Because if you remember the slide with how many different elements could be exercised as elements of data stewardship role, you could imagine that if all this has to be implemented, it requires certainly enforcement, substantial reinforcement of NSIs and Eurostat in terms of human resources, in terms of technical infrastructure, capacity, financial resources, but also culture changes and technological support. And then the final element, not surprisingly, which was covered in the discussion, which emerged also during the survey, was how to ensure statistical values and fundamental principles of official statistics, how to continue to do our core function, but at the same time to assume data stewardship functions and roles, especially when we are talking about data not directly related to production and dissemination of official statistics. So this is where the debate in ESS state. I guess this element sounds very familiar for you, but time from time it's good to have a summary to see where are the common questions, where are the common understandings, and which are still the common issues which we need to address and continue discussing. So then my last slide, if with substantial information, if we could move to that. Please, to the next slide. Let's look at the future, where we have to, what we have to continue doing as a statistical community and in the context of ESS. I don't pretend that these bullet points have a particular order. I cannot say which one is more important or which one we should prioritize, because all of them seem to be needed to be done simultaneously. Of course, we need to continue building community of practice, to exchange experience, to learn from each other. And then in that respect, to clarifying what are really those elements of data stewardship which we could assume as official statistics, and to increase further the capabilities and resourcing of official statistics in that respect. And then I didn't talk about this, surprisingly. We will tell my fellow director generals in the ESS and in ECB as well, that we didn't surprisingly talk about ensuring sustainable use of new data sources, but this is part of is existential question for official statistics, and we have to link this question to the further development of an implementation of European data strategy, to the 4 legal acts which I explained at the beginning, and to see how all these developments could be useful in addressing the issue of sustainable use of new data sources for purposes of official statistics. And we need to continue building culture of trust in reusing data to address public needs, because with widening the debate of reusing data for public good, we are also, as one element of this discussion, we are also affected by this conversation, because the more data are flowing in the society, the more intensive is the talk about how to reuse this data, the more people already start to ask questions about official statistics and what are our rights, our obligations, whether we protect well the data, how we communicate with the other data holders, with users, with producers. And then again, it was highlighted several times in my presentation, but also by the other speakers today, we need to include the elements of data stewardships in the legal frameworks governing official statistics at national and European level. And it was mentioned by Slovenia that we are starting a discussion in ESS about potential revision of the basic European law on official statistics, Regulation 223 of 2009. And one of the elements, candidates for potential revision, is to see what is valuable to be said in this revised version about data stewardship functions, of course, being very careful to not to be intrusive, to be very careful to keep the subsidiarity principle, because we have to respect the specificity and the right of the countries and the public administration in each country to follow its tradition, its own view, how the data stewardship function should be applied in the country. So with that, we could go to the really last slide, which is just a nice final close. At the end, we should have a party today because this is the 30th anniversary of EFTA, and it's good to finish with a dance. So when the rhythm of music changes, the dance steps must change also. So if we fail to listen what is going on around us, we will be out of the step. So therefore, thank you very much for your attention, for this opportunity to discuss the data stewardship topic, very relevant, very timely, and very inspiring conference today. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer to any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. Yes, there are indeed a couple of questions, and also to you, Geir. So if you could, both of you, stick around and don't hesitate to interact between two of you. If I can just start with a question that came to Geir earlier on. How do we position the role and function of data stewardship for a government administration overall in a situation where other actors strongly occupy the data space because of their former role in data management for operational and service delivery purposes? It's quite a long question. It's also added here, they are often seen by policymakers in government as the key player when it comes to data stewardship issues, which is also often reflected in the resourcing. Would you reflect on this, Geir?
Absolutely, and I think my answer resonates very well with what Mariana just shared when it comes to the replies from different statistical organizations within the ESS, because we are not the only actor when it comes to data stewardship in Norway. For example, we have a safe login system for individuals who want to utilize public services. That system is established by a digital directorate, another public entity, and not Statistics Norway. They have the same directorate have established an internet portal for digital dialogue between businesses and public entities. A third example that this directorate, digitalization directorate, has developed is they call it the machine platform, which is a data exchange system for public entities. So, for example, when Statistics Norway, when we receive data on a daily basis from the custom directorate in Norway, we get all transactions, all cross-border economic activities in Norway. Every night they are transferred from the customs directorate and to Statistics Norway. And when we get those data, we use this machine or this data exchange tool that is developed by another governmental agency, which is the Directorate of Digitalization. So that is an example of, we have our different comparative advantages. Many data stewardship roles will belong to other public entities. So Statistics Norway's role is about, of course, first of all the registers. When we get our mandate is to get the information from these registers because we want to use the data to produce statistics. If the purpose is not to produce statistics, we cannot ask for this information. So we have to ask for information because we want to produce statistics. But as long as that purpose or goal is met, we can establish a close relationship that also includes, I would say, a data stewardship role. For example, we have quality agreements with, I think, about 30 register owners. And we have yearly meetings and a close dialogue about quality in the different registers. They have to give us information if they changes anything in their register. If they do, let's say, technological investments, they have to actually, according to the law, the statistical law, they have to inform us about it. And we also give their back to them based on our knowledge and competence. We give them feedback on the quality of the registers, and that is very helpful for their work in their within their purpose. So that is an example. When it comes to private source of data, because I saw one of the questions was related to that as well, and there it's more a one-way dialogue, to be honest. It's we get data from them. And the partnership is about them accepting that we use our role in society to get new data and present insights for everyone. And the partnership is, of course, related to their understanding of our role, and also that we, by using their data, can give more insights. And they also are user of statistics and knowledge, so they want more insights about their own sector. So it's a partnership in that way. But we don't, we don't interact in any other way when it comes to their data. We just get them from them, and we have had a good dialogue about the format and the standards that we want those data into our organization beforehand. So I guess that it was an attempt to answer the question. A long answer, but hopefully clarifying.
Yes, thank you. Actually, you included nicely the other couple of questions that were addressed to you as well on the data stewardship role, and whether others are competing, if you like, for that role. But then I would like to ask maybe Mariana, the next question. I understand correctly, you see the data stewardship role being restricted to the public sector. Does this exclude providing services to private data producers?
Okay, yes, thank you very much. No, I'm not excluding. I was just, we started with the public sector because this is, let's say, the question which we raised was what could be the data stewardship function in the public sector. In the same way, like at micro level, if you have an organization, you say you need a position of a data stewardship, a function in the private organization. If we consider the public sector or even narrow the government, do we need somebody to perform such an organization which needs to perform such kind of data stewardship function? And then there, if I could continue with the previous question, as we have seen based on experience, and that there could be many different elements of this data stewardship function, which rightly pointed out in the question itself, which could be placed by different governmental organizations. And the key question for us is there are in general two solutions. Either we want to be the data stewardship of the government, and which means that we, if you allow me to illustrate like this, we will not be called European Statistical Office or National Statistical Office, but we should be called National Statistical and Data Office or Agency, or European Statistical Office and Data Agency, which means that you assume the full functions of stewardship. And then we have case, I'm seeing Silke on the screen, and hello Silke, I know that ECB is going to, for example, the direction, and not only ECB, OECD, IMF, where, let's say, statistical departments are assuming a wider functions of being the data steward, but also we have different solutions, like is the case in European Commission, where rather having Eurostat to take all the functions for all the data, there is a kind of board which involves different players, including Eurostat, which could perform different elements of this data stewardship role. Because, for example, if you recognize that cloud computing or digital infrastructure is an important part of data stewardship role, then in European Commission, this is the service which is the digital service, or in national governments, there could be different players who could provide this digital infrastructure. So this is not for statistical office. That's why we have to have this conversation, and also which elements is good for the statistical office to take, where we have a comparative advantage, as Geir said, or whether it brings additional value for us, or they will facilitate doing our business. And then we could expand the conversation to the private sector as well, because data stewardship, and this is one of the ideas of Data Governance Act, that there is somebody in the government who will play a kind of intermediate role, intermediation between the government and the public sector. And again, the question is, do we want to be such kind of player to provide this dispute resolution mechanism, or it's rather for somebody else to do that? So many more questions than answers, but I think this is the beauty of this event, that if you ask good questions, you will find good answers. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. We have actually the next speaker, I should say, rightly ready, but maybe if you want to reflect on the last question here, it's maybe the question is not very clear, but it sort of illustrates the uncertainty that some people have in different formats. They are talking about, because both of you talked about clouds, and the question is how in this case will be the situation with confidentiality. Do you have any comments on that?
I'm happy to give a short comment, and perhaps Mariana. But first of all, when it comes to information security, of course, this is crucial for us, and any breach of, let's say, GDPR regulations or anything else would be in both in the traditional on-premise data storage or in a new cloud world would be devastating, of course, for anyone. So the security measures have to be very well, and our experience this far is that the cloud companies offer much better safety and security systems than on-premise. Then Statistics Norway will never be able to compete with the big actors, international actors in this. And we have actually tested this, because we had spent a lot of time and resources in actually investigating, all risks. And we asked a company on our behalf to do a break-in attempt, a hacking attempt towards Statistics Norway, to just see if it was possible to get information that they should not be able to get. And the result was very inspiring. And the new cloud platform, they did not at all manage to get information. They struggled also to get information from the on-premise stored data, but it was easier for them to get access via that channel. But we discovered one vulnerability, and I guess this is a general learning, and that was actually about our own employees. That is the only, the last vulnerability. It's hard to, defend yourself against someone that has the wrong motives. But I think all of us have motivated and loyal employees, but I mean, to have, what should I say, a consciousness among the employees, that is always a good thing. Consciousness about the information security and not be naive towards emails and break-in attempts. But it's a much more complicated issue than what I was able to say in a few words. But we have done a lot on this. So if anyone is interested, I'm sure we can share via bilateral contacts.
Thanks again, Geir. And also to you, Mariana. I guess you are good. You don't have anything to add here, Mariana?
No, just to say very, very quickly that first of all, I fully agree with Geir on that we will never be able to take care about digital infrastructure in the same way like professionals could do that. But I just wanted to point out just one thing, that we have to accept that this period when the data were coming to us and we were taking care to protect them and to store them and to process them in our premises is over, because the modern world is moving to using cloud services, the digital platforms, different ways to organize the data. And then if I could say like this, not the data will come to us, but we have to go to the data in the digital space and in the cloud. And this has serious implications on the way we are doing our work daily, purely technically, in order to arrive to the data, to get them, to process them, but also it has serious implications on building trust, that in the future, all our measures, all our talks, communication on how we are ensuring that the data which we are using for official statistics are protected has to be updated, because we are not anymore the only one who are taking care for this data in our premises. So that's why we have a long journey to go ahead, but to do it quickly, because we have to continue producing statistics, but in this new environment when data are not in our premises. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much to both of you. So next up here, as we already mentioned, is Silke Stapel-Weber. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. She's the Director General of Statistics at the European Central Bank. And her presentation is about data governance as a long and exciting journey. So Silke, go ahead.
Thank you very, very much. I hope my slides are visible.
Yes, they are.
Okay, perfect then. Yes, dear colleagues, dear participants, I was really looking forward to meeting you all in person. Many of you are our personal friends in this nice EFTA house in Brussels. Well, the pandemic developments forced us to meet virtually again, but the lively discussions we had today actually demonstrate that we managed to engage with each other also in this way. So I'm looking forward to discussing with you today the evolutionary path towards a sustainable data governance at the ECB. Now my slides are not moving further, which I don't understand. Do my slides move further for you?
No, they don't. But I think that if this is not working, we can take it over. Then Braille could do that, I guess.
Yeah, before we waste more time. It worked in the test. I'm sorry for that. I don't know why now.
No problem. I had similar problems before. It's
Okay.
I think we're just preparing
Could
it.
kindly go to the second slide, please, immediately. Thank you very much. Without doubt, today data has dramatically changed its role and its recognition in our society. Within what some call the fourth industrial revolution, data is recognized as an increasingly essential resource for economic growth, competitiveness, innovation, job creation, and progress of the society as a whole. Even more, the transformation of the society via digital technologies introduces a new age of data, as expressed in the European Commission data strategy published last year. Unfortunately, history has taught us that the progress in the science and technology leads to an exceptionally increasing data availability, creating in a first step high complexity. Look at the cluttered and complex data landscape today. But there's hope. In the history of science, things often grew seemingly complex before they were unified under a simple principle. Albert Einstein developed a unified theory describing both gravity and electromagnetism in his attempt to find a simpler and more holistic framework. Einstein was well aware of the important difference between simplicity and simple-mindedness when he stated, "Make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler." In the next 20 minutes, I will use his wisdom to highlight data initiatives that are able to achieve this fruitful level of simplicity. For this, I will focus on the data governance and at the European Central Bank as long-lasting and evolutionary process. Next slide, please. I will highlight that it is not only the principle of data governance themselves that matter, but rather our capacity to overcome a combination of human, statistical, technical, legal, and many other change management challenges in order to achieve a path towards a common data architecture and thus simplicity. Next slide, please. Taking into account the changing role of data, we have defined the aim of data management and governance at the ECB in the following way. We strive to maximize the value of our data for decision-making processes relevant for the fulfillment of our multiple tasks, while respecting applicable confidentiality and protection regimes at European as well as national level. Due consideration is given to maximize the value of our data for other actors, including partner institutions, market participants, academia, and the public at large. In this way, these data also contribute to make the EU a leader in a data-driven society as targeted by the European data strategy of the European Commission. Next slide, please. Before describing our journey to a better data governance, allow me to start with our role as central bank statisticians and their close connection to other statistical structures. Next slide, please. Our central bank statistics, as rooted in treaties and statutes, serve a number of purposes, including monetary policy, financial stability, prudential supervision, oversight of payment systems, banknotes, and many others. In recent years, these tasks developed fast, including the use of non-standard measures in monetary policy, the creation of the single supervisory mechanism, and the creation of the European Systemic Risk Board, to whom we provide statistical expertise and support. At the same time, our statistics are very important public good, with a high responsibility to us. Our statistics are primarily focused on the euro area and often regulated by the ECB as lawmaker, requiring obviously international cooperation and the need to follow standards, ideally international standards. Furthermore, within Europe, I'm happy to see how our central bank statistical community is closely collaborating as a team with the statistical offices the national statistical offices and the European Statistical System and Eurostat as a whole, recognizing that the big challenges ahead to achieve Einstein's path to simplicity can only be jointly met. Next slide, please. In addition to these statistical functions for which we are competent and where well-established international structures exist, data obviously go far beyond statistics. We thus not only have to master the integration of our increasing number of micro data sets with the established macro statistics, but we need to combine in addition both worlds, the statistical world and the data world, within an encompassing data governance framework in order to maximize the usefulness of data for the fulfillment of our diverse tasks. This covers data by other business areas of the ECB, for example, in payments oversight or monetary policy operations. A recent example outside our classical sphere is the new world of unstructured data like speeches, information from social media or newspapers. Today, interconnecting statistics with information available via documents and social media has become highly relevant for most of our users. And an example of how we do this I have included in the annex of my presentation. Next slide, please. Storing unstructured data and applying combined advanced analytics with structured data is boosted by technological progress. At the same time, a sustainable and governed framework requires the design of taxonomies that link unstructured with structured data. We thus need to broaden our horizons in this respect as well, teaming up with the information management areas and the IT areas of our offices. Finally, the recent crisis and fast innovation, including in analytical methods, led to an increasing need for the creation and sharing of multi-purpose data sets, connecting data from a wide array of sources. In addition, the ever-increasing demand for data demonstrated the limits in continuing the compartmented collection of new information from an increasing number of institutions in Europe. At the same time, finding a solution to those challenges is complicated by legacy IT and data frameworks. For us, the main pain points are data were organized in an application-centric way, copying and modifying data, including master data, without registration and feedback. That was the rule rather than the exception. IT architects and data architects had different languages, responsibilities, and fora for their interactions. Highly confidential data were provided in compartmented, secure environments. Interconnections with other information was not possible. Information sharing between public institutions remains painful. Data were collected even within the same EU regulation with different national standards, timelines, and transmission standards. The use of new technologies as the cloud infrastructure provide exciting solutions to knowledge creation and sharing as well. Statistical production chains. We just discussed it before I started my talk today. At the same time, this environment remains vulnerable in its general use, not least after the European Court of Justice withdrew in 2020 the adequacy decision of the European Commission for a number of countries, including the United States. This makes the use of, in particular, US cloud services difficult for sensitive personal data and really calls for a European solution. In our course to achieve simplicity out of this complexity, we need to resolve those problems fundamentally by rethinking the data architecture throughout the full value chain of statistics and data. Building up a sustainable data governance ecosystem at the ECB requires thus embedding it into a wider European data and IT governance structure. Next slide, please. In the following, I will summarize a few structures and initiatives helping to achieve simplicity, starting from the European perspective. And for some, I don't need to go very much in detail because speakers this morning already very nicely did it. The European Commission, who published its data strategy in 2020, can, within its competence, support the build-up of a European cloud infrastructure in line with the General Data Protection Regulation, a crucial element for knowledge creation and knowledge sharing across also the European system of central banks and the single supervisory mechanism, in particular for sensitive data. It will as well, via the Data Act, foster better sharing of business data with public authorities, avoiding the current hurdles we all experienced during the hype to use high-frequency data to tackle statistically the COVID-19 crisis. To support faster innovation, the European Commission will create a European Data Innovation Board, advising it on data sharing and the prioritization of cross-sector interoperability standards. We support these appreciated initiatives and will influence them by using the power of the ECB to comment on the respective regulations. Next slide, please. A second crucial initiative in ensuring a high level of integrated data at source for statistical, supervisory and resolution information is offered by the European Banking Authority feasibility study, sketching out a vision of a common business architecture. Integrating the reporting requirements for statistical, resolution and prudential reporting will reduce drastically complexity and the up to now ever-increasing reporting burden. It will allow as well never-seen interconnections between the datasets and a fast and consolidated answer to react to crisis needs or financial innovation. So we will improve our agility in order to stay relevant and always ahead of the wave. A common standard data dictionary and a common data model are prerequisites for this goal, allowing to understand how data sets are defined and interconnected. Next slide, please. At the ECB, we will do a first step in direction of this wider vision in the next years with setting up the integrated reporting framework for banks for statistical data. In my view, this is a formidable approach in translating Einstein's request to identify simplicity out of complexity. Indeed, this reporting framework, integrated reporting framework, aims at one regulation, one data dictionary, one reporting model, one derogation scheme, one virtual collaboration platform, and a unified revision policy. And all of this really simplify things without making it simplistic. And it will help to bring down also, first and foremost, the reporting burden we are currently putting upon the industry, which is estimated by the European Commission to be in the order of 4 billion euros per year. Reporting agents will be helped via a tool translating their bank internal standards to a common European reporting standard as expressed in the integrated reporting framework. Within a common reporting platform, national and European institutions could collaborate in various forms in quality management, aggregation and compilation statistics from granular information. Furthermore, such a system might form a nucleus of ensuring knowledge sharing and knowledge creation between national and European authorities, including via models and advanced analytics ready for decision making. With other words, what we will be doing in the remainder of this decade, and this is as long as it will take us, is to stop doing everything 19 times. We will find new ways of collaborating with each other, because having everything once by no means that everything has to be central. This is a thing of the past. We will work in new collaboration forms with each other in order to stay relevant and performant, and in order to act as a system and not individually, but only when we act as a system and not everybody behind its cozy walled gardens, we will be able to meet the challenges. How could such new forms of collaboration look like? Well, it could be that one national central bank will do a task for all of us, or a group of national central banks will do something for all of us, or where appropriate and necessary, the ECB will do centrally everything for all of us. All of this will make us more agile and more reactive to the challenges which already exist and the challenges ahead. And it will enable us to use the micro data sources, the tiny little Lego blocks, and combine them as and when needed to traditional statistics and data, but also to new upcoming requests in a much more agile way than we are able to do it today. At the ECB, we realize that within these European initiatives, the ECB as a whole, combining supervisory and classical central banking tasks, has an opportunity to improve its own governance structure for data. We realized we also need to change. For the first time in 2016, the ECB recognized the central role of data and data integration for decision-making as core target in its business strategy. In addition, following the recommendation of an external consultancy company, a simple data governance structure was created, including a data committee, a strategic element. I think you can go to the next slide, please. Sorry. A simple data governance structure was created, including a data committee as strategic element and a data stewards group as the operational element. Within the structure, a data policy as well various data management strategies were enacted. However, it became clear over time that everybody easily agrees on high-level principles and policies as long as the own business area was not touched upon. Thus, the overall data governance progress was slow and remained largely to the individual silos. Next slide, please. Taking into account the ambitious European targets, our executive board decided in December last year to establish a new ECB-wide corporate data governance structure, which includes an ECB data office reporting directly to me as chief data officer. And it designated an executive board member, Mrs. Schnabel, as lead sponsor for the new ecosystem to demonstrate the commitment by the executive board to this new data management ecosystem, as well as assigned the Director General of Statistics as chair of the data committee. Next, push please. The mandate of the data office is expressed operationally. Based on a common data management of the ECB and the SSM, the ECB data office will ensure a single and sustainable user experience, working with data available across the institution with high flexibility and short time to market, managed in an integrated way and enabling end-to-end digitalized advanced analytics. Next slide, please. On top of the new ecosystem is the strategic layer, the data committee founded in 2016. The data committee is taking a cross-functional and cross-business area perspective on all ECB data relevant matters. The operational layer, that is the layer where the data management in the institution is practically implemented, is the data steward group. This group interconnects data experts of all relevant business areas. Next push, please. The new corporate element of the data management ecosystem, which was missing before, is the data office. So I was the chief data officer, and when I asked where's my office, it didn't actually exist. It is equipped now with the powerful tool, the data visum, that is mandatory for all data-intensive projects at the ECB, and a checkpoint for compliance with the, or at least the path towards the target data architecture of the ECB. In this way, the visum interconnects the data committee with the project steering committee in providing a prioritization tool for projects and ensuring a smooth, transparent and coordinated path of the ECB towards the common data architecture across the whole organization. This already bears fruit and is enabling scalable advanced analytics for decision making. This shared vision of a common data architecture includes that all data assets are commonly available in a central data lake structured around a common data access policy and a unique access system. Those data are registered and can be interconnected via a common data dictionary that as well provides the necessary input for a data catalog of the institution and other relevant metadata. Master data are managed centrally and are not copied but called upon by our applications and data modes, providing a single source of reference for all applications. Common and standardized tools exist for collecting, compiling, analyzing, and disseminating data. Data marts are available for interconnected data assets and can be safely shared as they respect all access restrictions to the underlying sources and data sets. Next slide, please. We are obviously not yet there. However, I consider us now to be on the right path to simplicity via a long and encouraging journey. At the same time, we are humble enough to recognize that continuous efforts are needed and surprises are to be expected. Our first experience towards our common goal, for example, has taught us that simple is far away from being easy. An example is the implementation of our key data management principle, collect information only once. What is more logical and could be more resource saving than this? However, this principle achieves the reduction of the reporting burden and in parallel maximizes the usefulness of data and the ability to quickly and consistently adapt to the fast-moving financial innovation. But what when stop collecting confidential statistical information for national purposes on the one hand and for tasks of the European system of central banks on the other hand? Who decides on the use of the data? Which law applies? In principle, European law supersedes national law, but this makes the national use of data difficult and bureaucratic, with the need for central decisions. We need to find ways to preserve the different uses of data in an efficient way, allowing subsidiarity for the use of information for national purposes. This is only one of the many challenges we face when simplifying the data flows and implementing a target business architecture for data. Next slide, please. We are so just at the start of an exciting and never-ending evolutionary process. Data stewardship, data governance, data management is a never-ending marathon, not a sprint. On this journey, fruitful exchanges of views are the essence of staying on the viable path. I'm so looking forward to a lively exchange of views with you. A diversity of experiences, paths and views are vital in achieving a common target to achieve simplicity out of complexity. Another push, please. But never forget, the devil is in the detail. I thank you for your attention and look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. This was a nice way to conclude. I think we should go, if you allow me to go straight to the next presentation. We have a few minutes reserved for questions at 1 o'clock before we break for lunch. So it would be nice if we could go directly to Iceland. I think we're going to Iceland. So as I said this morning, we are in many countries, many cities today. So next up is Gunnar Jakobsson. He's the Deputy Governor for Financial Stability of the Icelandic Central Bank, and he'll be talking about data matters, a central banking perspective. So Gunnar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Þorfinnur. And you wouldn't have been forgiven if you had butchered my name. So
no, that's for sure. I got that.
I'm going to put my slides up here. Are they coming up in full screen?
Yes, they are.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak at this conference. I've learned quite a bit already this morning. And just to introduce, I'm Gunnar Jakobsson, and I've been the Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Iceland since March 2020. So I came into my role directly into COVID. And during that period, I've obviously been dealing with quite a few of the challenges that you have highlighted this morning around data, frequency of data, high frequency indicators, and so forth. I am pleased to be here on the 30th anniversary of the EFTA Statistical Office, and it is a privilege to spend time with you, the premier data stewards of all of Europe, essentially. And happy birthday to the Statistical Office. There were three reasons why I was excited to be here today. First of all was I was hoping to meet all of you and spend some time to get to know the people that run the backbone of data in Europe. That will have to wait to a better time, unfortunately, but at least we are meeting here virtually. Second, I was excited about learning about your priorities, and I have to say that the future is quite bright if we are able to harness all of the ambition and energy that I've witnessed this morning, because these frameworks and plans that are on the table are quite exciting. And the last three presentations have been quite enriching for someone that works at a central bank where we are a big user of data. And then my third reason was to plant the seeds of central bank perspective, because we have been discussing this morning about we can only collect data for a particular purpose and then we cannot share it for a different purpose. This often causes challenges in sharing data between statistical offices and central banks, because central banks have a broader mandate than being a guardian of economic indicators. We're using it for policy making across a broad spectrum that I'll come to later. I also want to just make the point that the work that statistical offices do is increasingly important. It's always been important, but in a society that is becoming data driven, we have to invest in this space. And we have been quite vocal advocates of the statistics of Iceland in our conversation with the government there, that we need to invest further in statistical offices, because this work, we are knowledge workers in central banks, and you can't be a knowledge worker without data and information. I will focus on three things in my remarks, and I hope to leave behind, and I have already heard a strong echo to what I was planning to leave behind. So I think this is not going to be difficult for anyone to remember. But first of all, data matters, and it matters a great deal, and I'll come to that in a moment. So we need to be relentless in pursuit of data, different ways of collecting data. And it was quite interesting to hear Geir from Statistics Norway to explain what they've been doing with respect to getting access to payment systems, customs information directly, etc., which I think is crucial. My second point is around data stewards and key stakeholders must collaborate. I think I've heard quite a few times this morning about partnerships, and we need to have a strong partnership between statistic offices and central banks. And the last point, which I'll show you towards the end, some work that we're doing at the central bank, but data is worthless without strong means of sharing. So the transmission of data can really unlock some potential in the market, as well as provide transparency on the reasons behind some of the policy making that takes place at a central bank. If we get to, I quite like the picture here on the right hand side, and the comment made by Mr. Henry earlier this morning about that data is the oil of the modern world quite resonated with me. I've been passionate about data for quite some time, and I spent 15 years prior to becoming a central banker as a risk manager at a large international bank. And there you truly get to appreciate robust data. I went through the financial crisis of 2008, and the risk analysis based on robust data was really what differentiated between the winners and losers of that crisis. And now as a policymaker, I have come to appreciate it even further, because when we were sitting back in March 2020, and starting to think about what policy actions we should take, it was not easy because we didn't have a lot of data. We didn't have a lot of data other than looking to past crises, and this COVID crisis was unfolding with some similarities, but with vast differences as well, compared to, for example, the crisis of 2008. But why I like the picture on the right is we need to create a virtuous cycle, virtuous learning cycle with our data. Because what happens here is that we have data, then we have decision making, and then we have behavioral changes. And they provide a feedback loop to each part of the picture here. And we need to find ways how we can effectively get the data out into the economy, and then that will make a difference in terms of what actions economic actors will take, and then we will collect new data and continue. I want to share just a brief story of my experience with CCAR. For those that don't know what CCAR is the stress testing done by the Federal Reserve. And this started right after the crisis of 2008. The first stress test was done in February 2009. And then over the coming years, we were working on enhancing the stress test in quite close collaboration with the Federal Reserve, the banks, the large banks and the Federal Reserves. There are two types of data that we're working with. It was one macroeconomic time series that we needed to construct sort of coherent and viable scenarios for the stress test. And there needed to be coherence between the various macroeconomic time series. And then the second was the microeconomic time series on how the asset prices would react to the macroeconomic scenarios. And this was done quite crudely in the beginning, but by being quite open on both sides in sharing feedback and sharing information and having an active dialogue, I believe that that stress test has been enhanced quite considerably over that time period. So what we can see here is then sort of data underpins policymaking, data underpins our decision making at central banks, but we need the data to be timely, consistent, and accurate. And you've all been touching on sort of the relevance on continuous improvements in data management, which I think that is the key, as we've seen in the presentation this morning. Just quickly on central banks have a much broader mandate now than they had for maybe in the past, where price stability was the primary focus, but now it is, as Silke mentioned, financial stability, secure financial markets, supervision, and we need to have data not only about the economy, we need to have data on all the actors in the economy, the soundness of the individual firms in the economy for supervision, and so forth. So if this is not sort of enough to convince us that data matters, then I think nothing will convince us. Then if we get to sort of how does it actually work? And now we go back to March 2020. When COVID hit us, we went into, as we have been more or less since then, with some periods of breaks, working from home or working in smaller groups. So in late March, early April, restrictions were made that there could only be 10 people together in a single space. And so what we decided to do at the central bank then was sort of to look at what data do we need, where do we need to improve, and who should we put to that task. So we put 10 people cross-functional from the central bank into a remote location where I was amongst those 10 and was leading the initiative, where we started looking at how can we get robust information quickly from both the banking system, but also from other economic actors, and get it quickly to the decision makers at the central bank. And this was a quite successful initiative and has then grown into a much more sustainable initiative within the central bank. And here we were focused on data, for example, like the liquidity position of banks that used to be collected monthly we went into a weekly or even more frequent cycles, the information on the loan moratoriums, corporate balance sheets, sort of non-bank corporate balance sheets, and trying to understand what was actually happening. So if we then go just related to that is, and this has been mentioned in the presentations earlier today, central banks as well as statistical offices had to start looking at different types of indicators. And I put together just a couple of examples that will go through reasonably quickly. But what is policymaking about? Policymaking is about understanding the current state and assessing the potential impact of actions being considered. Like in COVID, we're seeing the economy starting to slow down at an unseen pace. And then we had to consider first, what do we do to stimulate the actual real economy? And then second, what do we need to do so that the banks will continue to provide capital into the economy? And so we were then starting to look at quite a few different types of data to help us understand what was happening. And this one is quite interesting, and this is from Apple Mobility Trends, just looking at motor vehicles and pedestrian traffic in city of Reykjavik during January through October 2020. And just to see, no, this is not only in Reykjavik, this is across Nordic and US and UK. And just to seeing the difference in activity and mobility of people, sort of particularly for the service sector, tells you how rapidly this was slowing down. Then we were also looking at the number of flights and the scope of public health measures. And it's remarkable how, not surprising, but it's remarkable how correlated this is. And this sort of teaches us that we need to be inventive and try to look at different types of data continuously. Then this is an Icelandic chart where we were looking at, and as some of you may know, tourism was prior to COVID roughly a third of exports in Iceland. And you can see that number of tourists goes down from sort of this is an index and a percentage change goes down almost to nothing from April to June 2020. And that was a significant hit. And we can also then see that in the foreign payment card turnover. And obviously they correlate quite closely, but what is interesting with this graph is to see the composition of tourists that arrived in July through September 2020 was slightly different than it had been prior to the crisis, because the average spending per tourist increased quite a bit, as you can see from the graph. And then looking at, and again, maybe not surprising after the fact, but when you're monitoring it in real time and trying to read into it, sort of to see, you can see the miscellaneous services just drop down by 60%, while stables actually increased. And this is where we saw a shift in shopping from real stores to online stores. And then as we went further into the crisis, we see that people are spending a lot of time at home. So home improvement just takes off. And it's been a banner period for anyone in that business, the COVID area. So that's on why data matters and why we need to care about data and what central banks are sort of thinking about. Now we get to the effective collaboration. You've all covered sort of the complexity, the expertise, the funding required. I'm just going to draw two simple conclusions from it, which I believe echoes what I've heard earlier this morning. One is that we need to work closer together and more formal cooperation and data sharing, because this could enrich the data that is available and also ensure the security of the data. We also need to be considerate of those that are providing the data. The Central Bank of Iceland has quite extensive legal ground to collect data in the economy, but we should be considerate about not collecting data that others are collecting and trying to find a way, and I believe Silke said it earlier, that we don't want to do things 19 times. We want to do it once and use the data multiple times. And that will eventually ensure both some economies of scale, but also we're using consistent data, and the accuracy of data only needs to be verified once. Then just two slides on our collaboration with the Statistics of Iceland, which is quite good, and the relationship between the two organizations is quite good. And we are already collaborating quite strongly on balance of payment and national account statistics. We're also synchronizing data where needed and helping each other out and checking information and providing information based on what we source. So that is quite useful to ensure robust information on the status of the Icelandic economy. We're also starting to share transactional level data where that is possible. And I'll come to an example in a moment. But I think there are opportunities to improve. The sort of one of the challenges that we're faced with that has been raised today is when you collect data for one purpose, it's difficult or impossible to use it for a different purpose. And this is something that we need to work together on to ensure that we can work towards the principles of not doing things 19 times. And this is also relevant when we're thinking about, maybe there are one example that comes to mind, an efficiency work that was done at the Icelandic tax authorities by making the filings of corporations simpler, which then what it meant that we lost some information from the filings that was useful to understand sort of the economic status of the or situation of the corporation. And it was mainly because we hadn't been thinking about, when we were making the efficiency changes at the tax authorities, that there was other use for that data. And so this is something that we need to be considerate about and how we work together. There's an ongoing dialogue between us and Statistics Iceland, but particularly around improving the legal ground and the legal framework to make that more robust on what can be shared and for what purpose, so that we can truly help make Iceland a society that relies on data and good data. So one example, recent example, which is sort of in the space of balance of payments, but there is a change taking place with respect to personal remittances, where previously they would all go through bank transfers. But if we look at the period from 2016 to 2021, we're starting to see that the fintech platforms are taking over a larger, still small, but it's a significant change in a relatively short period, and we see how it spikes during COVID. And I think we are going to see this number grow quite significantly over the coming years, because now the accessibility and the awareness, it's hitting a tipping point. If we then get to the last point that people have mentioned, and that's sort of on the transmission of the information and sharing. I think the value proposition for sharing information has been outlined earlier today, and it gets back to Mr. Henry's point about data is the oil of the modern world. And we need to be obviously publishing with purpose, as was mentioned, but we need to ensure that the economic actors understand the policy decisions that we're making at the central bank, but also have access to the data, because I think the access helps innovation, both the first order innovation, where firms understand what's going on in the economy and then start new businesses to meet some unmet demand in the economy, but also the second order, where there are actors out there that can take our data, enrich it further, and make more insightful information about what's going on in the economy. And then I've already discussed the feedback loop, sort of creating a virtuous cycle. During COVID, we were quite focused on predictability. And I think this ties to us sharing information and being effective in publishing information, because that provides insight and predictability into what future policy actions might be based on how the data is trending. Then I would just, towards the end, I wanted to share with you one change that we are, for example, making at the Central Bank of Iceland, which makes it very concrete when you're talking about data and how valuable the data is. We have published for, and apologize, it's in Icelandic here on the right, but this is economic indicators, high-vis economic indicators. We have published a PDF document, which is roughly 100 pages, with a series of graphs and information. They're all in a relatively these are small graphs, so it can be hard to read. I've even enlarged them here for this presentation, but you then need to go into the PDF file and enlarge it, and then you need to go to a different place to try to get the time series. What we have now done is, and are aiming to go live with this in a reasonably short period, is to take, and I just took these three graphs that are on here as an example, make this into a cloud-based service. And we have touched on cloud in the prior presentation, and I completely agree with Geir's comment around that the cloud services are probably more secure than on-premise services. We can never compete with the large players in the cloud services when it comes to security. And we've even seen concrete examples of that in cyber risk in the Icelandic market. But what we decided to do is to take small steps into cloud, but at least quite deliberate. We would share in the cloud data that we're sharing already in other forms. So the risk of someone hacking in and getting access to the data would be relatively low, because we're not sharing micro level data, we're just sharing sort of the time series behind the information that we're providing here. Obviously, then we plan to go and take steps further, but this is just as an example of a graph earlier, and you see the scale at the bottom. Here, the user can then decide what period they want to research, and go from there. And then just two more graphs. And I thought after I end my presentation, I just want to go into a sort of a live beta platform and show you one, just sort of how this looks in real life, and end with that. But here we're just seeing another version of the graph where you can sort of easily see the data and it's on your screen. Another benefit of being in the cloud is that you have access to it on any device. It's your phone, it's your iPad or mobile handheld, it's your laptop, it's your office computer, it's your home computer. You just need a login ID and some secure ID to ensure your login if eventually it's sensitive data. But in this case, this is just data that we've already published. So it's going to be for external parties, not a complex logging. But we might want to have people establish accounts so that we can follow and see who is using the data for what purpose, so we can better serve our audience or our customers as a central bank. So I'll end then with sort of data will always matter. We need to collaborate, and transparency is key. And then happy birthday. I'll then just stop sharing this for a brief moment, and then I'll go into and just share the, I'm just trying to get here and just share the live platform just briefly. And just sort of going here, I think it goes here. Can you see the slides now, or the web browser?
Yeah, the Hagvisar.
Yes. So this is unfortunately in Icelandic for the audience, because we have not. We're just in a beta environment. But this would be like the first page in the PDF document, where you would navigate the document, and then you would just go into and get the graphs, and then you will be able to interact with what has historically been just a PDF document, and then you will be able to sort of get the raw data right there, and etc. and change the scale, as I was mentioning earlier. And we're just in a beta mode, as I mentioned, so we continue to develop this. But data matters a great deal for central banks, but it also matters for central banks to be transparent to the external world. So I will end here, and thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Gunnar. This is very exciting what you're developing as well. Not only for you data nerds, but also for media nerds like myself. So we have maybe just a few minutes for last questions before we break for lunch. And there was a question actually to both of you, if both of you, Silke and yourself, could maybe comment on if we have something comparable to the COVID economy recovery scoreboard. I mean, you talked so much about, especially Gunnar, about the all these different graphs and the scoreboards. But do we have something comparable if we look at statistic data-wise to the COVID economy recovery?
So the question is that whether we have something comparable from prior periods.
Yes, I understand the question like that. If we have, I mean, because these what we've seen here is so extreme and so explicit. Do we have something comparable in terms of?
Let me just paraphrase shortly. The question was coming from my side. So I was wondering if you provide also, I mean, especially linked right now to the COVID situation, if you provide some indicators or so, let's say short term or so, where you talk about, you know, what are the effects, and do you see any signals of recovery or so on your side? Because I mean, Eurostat has together with the ESS, they have set up this recovery dashboard, and I was just wondering if you have something similar.
I mean, we do not have a public at the Central Bank of Iceland where we publish a recovery dashboard, but we have the information and we publish it as part of our, for example, when we have the monetary policy meeting and the introduction of when we go over the decision making at the monetary policy committee, where we then publish, but it's a PowerPoint presentation where we show the data. I mean, the metrics that we're tracking are quite common to what is being tracked all across Europe. It's sort of the status of the banking system, the moratoria, how are the households and the corporations coming out of the crisis, the debt levels, and then we're also quite closely watching these indicators that I showed earlier about the traffic and mobility of people, and how the economy may be evolving and changing, because there's not only we've seen it in the housing market in Iceland and across Europe, where the preference is changing. People are working from home, so it's hard for if there are two parties working in a household with 3 or more kids, then it's a quite different composition than it was when you left for work in the morning. So we're also monitoring those, but we have not gone, we're not that far advanced to have that published online by the central bank. But that's something that is in the works, because when we roll out the work that I was just demonstrating, then it would be easy to add to that live picture of the status of the state of the economy additional metrics or tracking.
Well, I can be very short on this question because I would have said exactly the same, like Gunnar said now. No, but I would like to underline here that also between the 2 big pillars of statistical production in the European Union, Eurostat and the Eurostat and the ESS and the ECB and the ESCB, we also try not to duplicate efforts. Yeah, and the recovery dashboard of Eurostat is fantastic. Yeah, so then we link it on our website and get there. But of course, internally, we use all information available to us, special surveys of households, to see if the policy measures actually translate, if they arrive where they should arrive, yeah, how is the access to finance, how is the access to credit, and so on. So there is a whole really a multitude of sources that are used, which then feed the models of our colleagues. And of course, another source seeing our assessment of the situation is also the monthly press conference after the governing council meetings, where also the assessment of the whole system will be provided by Madame Lagarde. Yeah, but we are not, as a matter of principle, duplicating efforts, because this would, we are all not blessed with resources in abundance. So I think we should work towards the respective strengths in this respect as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I was also more wondering about if you have like special, let's say, indicators other than the ones that are presented in the dashboard. You know, so but okay, I understood that you do well. You follow up internally and you provide also information to policymakers. A second question that I had, if I might just take the occasion here to state that also, was when I heard the presentation from Gunnar saying, well, and I think this is of course similar, I would guess, everywhere in central banks, you're collecting data from, well, the economic actors, the enterprises, and so on and so on. And I was just wondering if you have also, well, there a kind of a coordination going on with other producers of statistics, so in order to, well, not double up or to increase the response burden on the side of the enterprise, because from statistics I know that this is a recurrent topic always. How can we reduce a response burden, of course?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. And when I joined the central bank, this was one of the areas that I took a great interest in, sort of data management, and wanted to, I think there's a great opportunity there for a country like Iceland. We are small, the lines of communications are short, so it should be relatively easy for us to get a good grasp of what data is available and what data do we need to collect in addition. So I've been in active dialogue with Statistics of Iceland and as well as the Ministry, the Prime Minister, Office of Prime Minister, and the Ministry of Finance, and very focused on financial data, or data on the financial sector, because my role is financial stability. And so I've been trying to get off the ground this coordination effort across governmental agencies so that data is shared more effectively between agencies. We are only in the design stages, so we are sort of working on sort of the roles and responsibilities. How do we get it off the ground? What do we need to think about? I also think there is a benefit there from an infrastructure perspective, because many offices, particularly in Iceland, is that you have small governmental agencies that have maybe 2 or 3 technology experts, and they will benefit from sitting in a room with technology experts across the governmental agencies to try to share best practices, because data should be objective. there shouldn't be anything that we need to hide when it comes to data. We should be able to share data freely. Obviously, we need to consider privacy of the individual. We need to consider security and all of those matters. So we are also taking that into consideration. So currently, there's a coordination between us and Statistics of Iceland, but it doesn't go much further than that at the moment. But we would like to expand it.
Yeah, and maybe very shortly from my side, I mean, my answer to your question is what I said about the integrated reporting framework, yeah, where at the moment, if you are a bank in the Eurozone, which works in all 19 countries, you have 19 different systems to report your data, sometimes even more than 19, because for the supervisors, it may be different than for the statisticians and so on. And this is what we would like to address now in this decade, yeah, and really, and at the same time, like lowering then the reporting burden, because if the financial industry would face only one system in which they have to report their data, one data model, one way of technically transmitting the data, that is good for the industry, but it enables us also to have a completely different collaboration model as system in mind. Yeah, and for instance, you quite nicely said it, the smaller actors who have also not the manpower and the financial power behind their systems may benefit from doing things together rather than everybody individually here. And this was, but it requires what was also really mentioned by many today, building the trust, yeah, building to work together and being sure that confidential information is only shared between those who have the right to access them, but enabling wide sharing in the framework of the applicable law. So really, we are committed to stop doing everything 19 times. And of course, we can only regulate in the Euro area, but we are inviting also other partners in Europe to participate in this on a voluntary basis, because everybody could benefit at the end of the day. And we would become the really forward-looking, powerful statistical system that we need in order to meet the challenges and be able to play our role and be the official source of information that we would like to be, also in comparison to other market players which come up sometimes much faster than we do with solutions to problems. But if you look closer at the quality, that's a different thing. Yeah? So we need to become more agile, put our eggs in one basket rather than having 19 baskets with nice walled gardens around it. I actually dream about something that one of my former bosses called a data Schengen. So maybe one day we will be there. Thank you.
And I think that's an excellent point. And just to echo that, and I think this conference is also an excellent way of just sharing what is going on, because I've learned quite a bit this morning. And if you would see sort of my computer screen here, but you don't, is that it's covered with yellow stickers where I've been taking down ideas that I'm going to take back to my desk and start thinking about what can we do differently. Because of what you learn when you're starting to, the dialogue is always the first and often very effective way of getting what we need to accomplish together, i.e. the data sharing. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot also.
Yep. Thank you so much, Silke Stapel-Weber and Gunnar Jakobsson, for your great inputs here. We are on the minute according to program. And so we are about to break for 1 hour lunch. We will start again at 2:15. We will have three perspectives from 3 different countries, including 2 EFTA member states, on the data stewardship, and also intervention from UNICEF. So come back here at 2:15, but enjoy the break until then. Thank you.